Trident Wargaming. Build it, paint it, play it.
Right. It's like, drop the mic.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Mic drop moment.
Welcome back to Trident Wargaming, the only podcast that just loves Warhammer 10th edition so much, we're willing to die for it.
Best edition ever.
Best edition ever.
Absolutely.
So this
Scotty.
week we're actually going to be having a nice long conversation on some 10th edition topics to kind of get you guys wound up and ready for your 10th edition games. But as usual, let's kick off with our usual hobby corner here. Just catch up with you guys and what you've been working on. Arthur, what have you been working on?
Well, you've heard of the Warhammer Community Falcon. Not a lot of people have seen it. It's a rare piece of mystique. You are in the club if you've been part of the Falcon. If you aren't in the club, the Warhammer Community Falcon is named hence for being featured on Warhammer Community. And I realized he needed some friends, right? I thought it'd be very narrative, very Crusade-like, very fun. And frankly, I would be doing my opponents favors if I painted up, maybe like 3 Fire Prisms, 3 D Cannons, a Wraith Knight, or 2 or 3. Some really narrative stuff. So I got a couple Fire Prisms to show off. You'll see some more pictures probably in the outtakes. But spent a lot of time on them. They're looking pretty good. And I've never painted a Fire Prism before. I've owned like 3 previously. There was a time when Eldar players played Expert Crafters, and back then that was kind of the last time a Fire Prism was good, so I think I had picked up a few then. And it's a model from what? The 90s?
Not like that current model.
That current one is a little bit newer.
Yeah,
there was
quite
an
a bit.
older one before it.
With the pewter prism cannon.
Yeah, it had the really big fat crystal on it.
Yeah.
This has to be from when the Wraithguard were printed, or even before that, probably before that. This is like 2000 and odds then. It is such a beautiful kit. It assembled nice. It paints nice. It's a great kit. I'm really excited to get those. You'll be able to see those on the Trident Wargaming Instagram.
Yeah, all over them. We're having a whole week for them.
Eldar Supremacy Week in celebration of.
It's true.
What are you doing, Bill?
Well, it's been a pretty busy weekend. We were cranking out here at Trident HQ. We had a little sweatshop set up in the garage. Everyone was working on Titanicus terrain over the weekend. So big shout to all the MFGs who were there. Dustin, Ryan, Andy, Scott, Isaac.
Arthur in spirit.
We sent him a picture. Everybody was giving him a one-finger salute. He'll make the next one, though. It was just getting everything ready for that Titanicus demo day / slow go league that's going to be starting up here in July. And then I've been finishing off terrain, 40k terrain, getting ready for our GT here up in August. So it's going to be a big one for us anyways, going maxing out for 40 players. So it'll be pretty sweet.
It's a big deal.
It is.
To be fair to Arthur, he's more of a painting guy. I feel like his values like triple all the rest of us when painting time comes. So
well, just bring your airbrush kit.
Builders, some of us are painters. We split the labor.
Yeah.
Hey, to be fair, I was playing my league game. All right. Now, here's why I couldn't make it. My league opponent, if you didn't know, he had a fiance who just spent the last few months in the Philippines. He's coming back, and any day later, and he's going to be, no Warhammer for weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
This was the only possible time I couldn't assemble terrain.
And word on the street was it was Eldar on Eldar, so we all win.
It was a pretty balanced game.
It was.
Do I have a minute? Can I talk about that game? It's hobby stuff this week.
Yeah.
Bing, 60 seconds, go.
60 seconds. Boom, on Timer. Okay. If you've been totally in the dark, Eldar is very, very powerful. The most powerful codex as of the release of 10th edition Warhammer. And we had some Eldar on Eldar stuff. Both of us brought 3D cannons. He included some Dark Eldar heavy support. I had the Fire Prisms. And the Dark Eldar heavy support won out in the end. But the most important part was he had the Yin-Karn. If you didn't know, the Yin-Karn is fucking wild. It still retains that ability these days to deep strike exactly where something died, but it doesn't have to be 9 inches away, and it can charge afterwards. So he managed to plunk a Fire Prism with some Ravager Darklance fire. Bam, in comes this Yin-Karn. It smites, or whatever Careless Whisper saxophone song plays, 1D cannon to death, and then it charges another one and blows that up. And I was kind of joking, if you've ever played old StarCraft, you might remember in the Terran v Terran matchups, there was often like 5v5 Goliaths in the middle. And as soon as one person lost a Goliath, they broke and ran, because it's fucking game over. Yeah. We were joking, the first person to lose a D-cannon fucking break and run, game over. But it wasn't game over. I ended up taking that one for a victory in the end. But that's a whole other story. And that is thanks to the Warhammer Community Falcon.
Falcons.
Falcons.
I mean, I guess one got blown up, but yeah, fair enough. I've been actually plugging some odds and ends. I was working a bit on some Space Marine characters. I have a backlog of them. The characters are always a tough thing for me because I waste too much time on them for my painting skill. I did get some death marks painted up this week, so that I can maybe start to work on. No, they're not going to focus on that, but focus on doing some character sniping. So they're coming along good.
Like Farseers.
Among others.
You can see my Farseer, it's a problem.
It's a problem. Little does he know that death marks have towering. But we'll talk about that later. Yeah. So this, like I said at the start, our episode today is going to be all about 10th. Specifically, we're going to hit, I think, like 6 or 7 topics. Because we know that everybody and their dog can get just an insane amount of 10th edition content right now from their desired sources. And we will have lots and lots of 10th edition content. I know we're going to have some articles going up on the Trident website, and obviously there'll be lots of faction talk and stuff as we go down our podcast and etc. down the next couple months. But right now we want to talk about a few specific topics, specifically some controversial topics, some things that some people are not happy with or are happy with if you play Eldar. As well as I specifically wanted to talk about a topic that I don't think gets talked about enough, both on the internet and podcasts and wherever, and that's talking about objectives, both the fixed and tactical mission objectives, which are central to the design of the entire game, and they're almost getting no press whatsoever at all right now. But of course, if you go back to 9th, everybody knew that your secondaries were hugely important to how good or bad your army was. Of course, we don't have faction secondaries anymore, but we do have secondaries, and we're going to talk about them a little bit, what we think is good, bad, and indifferent, and then we'll wrap it up a little later on. But to open up, we're actually going to begin with our discussion on secondaries, both the fixed ones and the tactical ones. I know we have at least one fan in the building here for the tactical missions, but we're going to start talking about the fixed ones, and I'm just going to give a little content here, a little context, and then we will move on to what your guys' thoughts are on if they're good, they're bad, what you think they're good and bad for, what you think is good or bad about them, if you have any thoughts on that. So our fixed objectives, fixed mission objectives, there are 7 of them now, which is obviously way less than there was back in the day. 2 of them are kill objectives, assassinate and bring it down, function mostly the same as they used to. 2 of them are action objectives, both one for in your enemy's deployment zone and one just for sitting on top of objectives. And then there's 3 of them that are kind of like what I call a placement objective, where you just have to be certain places, like engage enemy or engage on all fronts, as well as a couple for sitting on objectives and being in your opponent's backline. A lot of these work the same as they did in 9th. They aren't terribly different. But if you're taking fixed objectives, these are the ones you need. You need to take 2, not 3, and they cap at 20, not 15. So they will play a pretty different role in your army construction. Like I said, we're all going to have some thoughts on it, but we're actually going to lead with Arthur. Hear his thoughts on those fixed mission objectives. what he likes or doesn't like, and if he thinks they're relevant.
Yeah, so they're definitely relevant, and they're going to be relevant, again, like in previous ones. Some are matchup dependent, where automatically you're going to sling one of those down, and you're going to score 20 points. I think... one of the downsides of 9th edition, I think, was the faction-specific secondaries, because there were some armies who just had amazing ones, and orcs got all of the good bits. There are no good bits left. They've been gotten. Sisters forever defended the shrine. Necrons and Admech both investigated some objectives in the middle that you couldn't really stop. They scored a lot of points for it. And World Eaters put blood everywhere, right? Like, to some extent, those objectives were uninteractive. And I think one of the things we're going to talk a lot about today is when the game is uninteractive, it's at its worst. When the game is interactive and both players have agency, and it comes down to who makes a better tactical decision, that is a better game. I don't know that the fixed objectives bring that. I don't think that they're bad. And I think overall, more people are probably going to lean towards the secondary ones, but there's going to be a couple armies that are going to play fixed ones just because their army can do that. Like Grey Knights, for example, I think are going to be able to play fixed objectives. Maybe Eldar. Genestealer Cult's going to be able to play fixed objectives. And that's going to have the same sort of uninteractive feel bads as 9th edition. And I don't think it's going to lead to feel goods. The ones that are interactive are like Storm Hostile Objective. That's a great objective. It forces you to go interact with your opponent. It's not easy to do. There's not enough points for that. No one's ever going to take that. But that's my thoughts on that. One of the things I don't like, in addition, is the way Bring It Down scores. Because a lot of things now have the vehicle tag that didn't in the past. Take Crisis Suits, for example. Every single suit is a vehicle. Every single Crisis Suit, 2 points. You're going to often see 9 Crisis Suits. That's 18 points. You've almost maxed that secondary. Paragon War Suits, that's 6. There's going to be a lot of really one-off. I think one of the good pieces of game design is Games Workshop has actually found a way to make like your single one-off light vehicles valuable. Your Chicken Walkers, well, yeah, maybe not valuable for your dollar, but like for 50 points, they're not terrible in an army that needs a little bit of help. Your War Walkers, your Scout Sentinels, those things actually feel good now, but you kind of get punished for taking maybe too many of them under that Bring It Down. Bill, your thoughts on Bring It Down? Or fixed secondaries?
Just the fixed secondaries. Fixed secondaries are... that was one of the hardest parts for 9th for myself, is always kind of which secondaries that I want to pick. What secondaries was my army giving up? It was a lot to take in, especially if you wanted to try and play competently. So I always found myself, I was either building towards a certain style with the actual secondaries, and missing that. What am I actually giving up in the back end? It was very hard to master and try and make both things happy. I do like the idea of just doing like the tactical ones. Just whatever comes up and you're trying to achieve, that secondary in particular. I do like that a lot. I think it takes just some of the thinking out of it. So it lets you just react to the table. But I do see the appeal of if your army's good at doing a fixed, that you take it. So it's definitely a weird spot, right? Like I want to have the game as fun, as interactive as possible, but at the same time, I want to capitalize on what my faction does best. And if that's flying around the board and not engaging, but still scoring points and, slowly whittling away what I want to, so be it. It's just kind of one of those things. I'm definitely looking forward to jumping in. I saw there's going to be pre-orders popping off in the next little while. It was on the Sunday preview
for the mission cards
for all the cards and stuff. Yeah, so I think that'll be pretty legit. I'm also happy about the Gambit stuff. Just to go off topic a little bit, I think the Gambits are a really neat way to kind of keep you in the game no matter what, as sort of that bust out that Hail Mary. And I don't know how relevant it'll ever be. I'm hoping that it does pop off from time to time and cause those big upset, like underdog moves. I think that'd be just awesome.
The first time I see a gambit actually work and win somebody a game, I'm gonna freak out.
Yeah. Like, oh
It's
shit!
gonna be like goal call. Like I'm gonna be like, oh,
Yeah.
like I'm gonna freak out. I don't think that they're gonna work that often, but when they do, it'll be hilarious or tragic. Or
you know what? There's one of those. The one where you got to get to the corners or whatever. What is it? Orbital Strike. That's one that Bill might be able to do playing Dark Eldar.
It's true. Very fast armies will definitely be able to pull that one off, or have good odds on it. Put it that way. I actually, honestly, not to be contrary here, but the way fixed objectives are built right now, like the way that they're written, and keeping in mind, we want to put this out there. People need to keep in mind, both the fixed and the tactical objectives will undoubtedly get changed over time, just like they did in 9th. So, ones that do end up kind of sucking or being bad will probably get boosted and vice versa. But anyway, for fixed objectives, the way I've been looking at it is I actually think that they're not necessarily for fast armies. That's not to say that fast armies can't do them. They absolutely can. But the way that the scoring is set up is basically that all the fixed objectives, more or less, except for the 2 kill ones, basically require you to get the max score on them every turn if you want to max your score. They're worth 20 points each, and they have like 20 points available. Like, you cannot possibly overscore them, except for, of course, the kill ones, like I said. So you really don't have any wiggle room. You don't have any leeway if you have a turn where you just didn't quite make it work out and you're going for high scores. Fixed objectives might not be for you, whereas the tactical ones, despite, of course, being a little random, they do tend to have a little bit higher of a score, which means that if you don't have a great turn where you just didn't quite score enough to max, or not max, but get, your score up how you want it, later in the game, maybe you get some better cards and they offer you a little more and suddenly you can catch up. And I think that fast armies might, and we'll talk about this more later, but might gravitate more towards that because it's got some forgiveness to it, whereas slow armies, I think, tactical objectives could be a risk. Because
all disappointed by the removal of no prisoners?
I'm not, obviously.
For the armies that you play, but as a
Arthur knows that all my armies were incredibly vulnerable to it. Honestly, I do think it's good because I think that with the stratification of toughness,
right,
and the way that the game is now, I kind of, right at this moment, I actually am happy there's not a no prisoners kind of objective, which really scores a ton for killing infantry, because I think infantry are kind of up against it already.
Right.
No prisoners, by the way, does of course still exist as a tactical, but it is different than it is or was before.
Yeah.
But anyway, for fixed, I just think, honestly, slower armies, they might not want to risk having to get pulled back and forth across the board as they get random objectives every turn. Because if they start to get into a bad turn or two, they're screwed. Whereas with the fixed, maybe they just build for them and hope that they can do them well. And if you can't do either, well, you're kind of screwed. But that's in the army building step. So
yeah,
I think
there is a world where your Dark Angels Terminators are going to cleanse or deploy teleport homers 5 turns in a row, and that's their game plan, because, like you said, they can't get to the corners, they can't get to opponents' objectives. They're just going to sit there and force you to come to them. You're right.
Yep. And, well, I think what you probably do, again, this is purely speculative, but I think if you're playing fixed, you probably pick one, and you build your army to say, I will score this every turn. That you're 90% sure I can do this every turn. And then you probably find a second one that you're pretty sure you can get 10 to 12 points on. And that one you swap out for Assassinate or Bring It Down when they pop up.
You build for either cleanse or deploy teleport homers?
Probably.
And unless you're Grey Knights, cults, etc.
Yeah. I think that's probably how you do it. Because here's the thing. Bring It Down, especially early in the edition, is going to be available a lot of the time. I actually think Assassinate will be too. I think a lot of armies are going to be bringing characters. And it's obviously snipers are very good now. But I don't think they'll dissuade people from taking characters. So I think those both will pop up a fair number of games. But you do want to have a backup that you're sure you can get half done, so you can get a 90 to 95 kind of score if you did everything else right. But you want one for sure that you're I need to be able to max this. And I think that's your strategy. I think. But more exciting, let's move on to the tactical missions, because that's kind of where all the fun is now. That's the hot new thing, and I know Arthur's very jazzed for him. So why don't you take us in, Arthur?
I think my favorite version of 8th edition Warhammer was when all of the factions got their own tactical objective deck, and you got to customize the deck a little bit. You could pull out certain cards, and you could put in yours, and then that was the deck you played with. Now, it never really had the chance to take off at a very competitive level. I think ITC missions were still the pinnacle of competitive Warhammer, but I think that they were the most fun. They enabled you to do the thing that your army wanted to do. Right, it rewarded you for being a Sister of Battle or being a Drukhari player or whatever it was. And then they kind of took that idea and they made that the main mission idea for 9th. But like I said earlier with the Secondaries in 9th, I think that kind of got lost as Codex Secondaries became prevalent. Because to some extent, you got rewarded for doing your army thing. That's great. I got rewarded for being a Sister of Battle and doing miracles. And sometimes that was problematic. I love taco missions. I have played 2 games of 10th. Both games were taco missions. And to be fair, I'm playing Eldar. I acknowledge they're very quick. I acknowledge they're very powerful. But I felt like I had the chance to score a lot of these. And I really like the thing that if you don't score one, you can huck it and you gain a CP. So you're kind of giving a little bit of a boost and for not scoring your points. I also like that the secondaries are they're priced in a very aggressive format. You do not need to score them every single turn. You can miss a couple and you can still score big points. So I think that is awesome. I like them. I like the format. I think it's a lot of fun. I hope that they get wholeheartedly adopted by the competitive community, because I think it's a great way to play Warhammer. It keeps the mission dynamic. You could be playing the best game of your life, but if you keep getting fucked, you're not winning that game. And it's a dice game. We play this competitive game, and sometimes with certain ways we play it and we method it, we plan for it, it doesn't end up being a dice game. It's a stat check, or it's come stop me from doing this. And that kind of takes away from the spirit of the game, to me, because that's uninteractive. One of the downsides about tactical missions, I think that there's only one that requires you to be on something at the end of the game turn or the end of your opponent's turn. So in many cases, your opponent doesn't have a lot of agency to stop you from doing the thing outside of the agency that the core rules give you, like Overwatch, Heroic Intervention, etc. In some ways, and I don't know if people have queued onto this yet, you actually are really rewarded for playing very durable forces that stick on middle objectives or your own objectives, because a lot of these are do an action on a middle objective, or take an opponent's objective, or kill an opponent's unit. And if you're playing a 10-man unit Custodes, someone's going to have a really hard time doing that. Or a 10-man unit Terminators. Even as many... I struggled to kill Gaunts. There was a 20-man unit of Gaunts in cover, and I had a hard time getting through them. So there is reinforcement for being durable to hold on to these, which is good. Bill, your thoughts on tacos?
Or burritos.
Or burritos.
Or quesadillas.
Kind of like what I was mentioning before. I really do like the idea of the tactical objectives. I like being able to have access to more ways to score. I think for like my particular play style, just jumping in, I think the tactical objectives will be really beneficial because I get, again, more chances to score throughout the game versus just relying on a couple fixed ones that I may or may not be able to pull off. Especially with my experience in like the movement phase and being able to manipulate that extra stuff. It's just very tough. With the new edition, though, it might, things might change. I do like the discard. I think that's always nice if you get a shitty one, right? Just get rid of it. I was a big fan of those Tempest of War and like earlier tactical objective missions as well. I thought those were really neat. Yeah, that's kind of my main thing. I do find myself leaning towards that more. I do also think it creates a bigger demand for like balanced gameplay. I think you want to have like those all-comer lists that can kind of deal with everything if you're going to rock tacticals. And I do think it would add an extra layer to the comp scene if people wanted to focus on doing that. I think it could be quite a good challenge for both players involved. So, yeah.
I'll open by saying I think basically no matter what you play army-wise, you should definitely try playing tactical missions at least a couple times just to kind of get a feel for it. Because I agree that I think it is, like, for lack of a better way to put it, I think it's a more fun way to play. I think it adds a little something to the game that kind of sometimes gets lost, especially in comp play where things can be very, very straightforward sometimes, that there is a very defined right way to do things. And I think tacticals, especially, like, I do think they've been incorporated well. I really liked the idea that GW went with, where, you know, even the tactical versions of the fixed objectives offer you more points than the fixed do, specifically because they want to add that little bonus in there. And as I said when we were talking about fixed, the tacticals in general do offer you more points because, you know, they are random. But that's actually both a strength and a weakness, because it does mean that, yeah, sometimes when you have a bad turn, which happens all the time, you get a little behind, but you can catch up. It gives you that, as Arthur mentioned, interactivity. I do think that, at least as they're currently built, that they do favor, or not favor, but that they are smarter for armies that have good mobility. Both, not just index-wise, but how you build your army specifically. And I agree also with Arthur that, to be fair, though, you can probably have a lot of success with them, even if you're not super fast, as long as you are really good at board control. Specifically, like a really tough army that can just kind of exert its will. You know, those big Terminator forces, Custodes, probably will have a lot of fun with it. Some of the beefier Chaos lists, things like that. Maybe even Knights, we'll see. But, like, looking at it, the full breakdown, there are, with the full tactical deck, you got 4 that are kill objectives, 3 that are actions, and 9 that involve you getting somewhere. So that kind of tells you more than half the deck is about you being in a certain place at a certain time, which is why speed and, as Arthur mentioned, board control are really important to them.
No, that's not just getting onto objectives. Some of that is being in the center. One of them is being in corners. That one's fucking hard.
It's hard. It's like the worst one. I was looking at them right? Like, if I draw that, I'm getting rid of it. Like,
one of them is you have to take your opponent's objective, and, like, that could be hard. A lot of missions
easy or hard, yeah.
But it's worth 8 victory points.
Yeah, it's worth a lot. Then there is one of the ones that I kind of threw in with the placement ones. Area denial's kind of both. It's the one where you have to hold the center, but you also have to keep your enemy out of the center. Yep. So it's kind of both. You kind of have to kill and be able to hold center. But yeah, I actually think, for, like, going through, and this applies to the fixed too, most of them, and here's the big thing, most of them are good. Like, they are usable in a game. I know in 9th at times there were, like, some of the generic objectives were hot garbage that you would never, ever, ever want to take. And I'm not saying that's not the case for some of these. Arthur mentioned the investigate sites I don't like. I still don't really like engage on all fronts. I still think that it needs to be buffed. But, like, for the most part, all of the ones there are decent. They're definitely doable, and I like the scoring on them. I think you should definitely play tacticals a few times, but if you play a slower, more plotting army, or an army that maybe is more about range damage, you might want to consider fixed, though. That's just my only real thoughts on it.
If you play cults or Grey Knights, play fixed.
Oh, yeah, maybe, yeah. They're probably good at both, but yeah. Yeah, I could see you just have a good plan. Any other closing thoughts on missions? Secondaries?
I'm excited.
All
I
right.
love tacos.
Then I'm excited too. I love Mexican food. But I just don't want it to be spicy.
Like,
okay, then we get to...
Is it because it
Do I
bites
look like
back?
a white person to you? Do I look like a... Anyway. I'm the colored guy now. Now we move into the spiciest part of the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I have a feeling we have some strong opinions over these next few topics. We're going to be diving into a few specific rules that have caused some consternation in the community. We all have thoughts. They're probably mostly negative. But I'm going to take you through just one word at a time. I'm going to take you guys through, and we'll be kicking off with Arthur again because he's always got the best takes. Arthur, deep down, reach in, and bring out your feelings on this word. Towering.
Oh, fucking kill me, dude. Ooh! Let me start a timer. 10 minutes. Scotty told us we have so many topics that we can only have 10 minutes to talk about stuff.
10 minutes.
I started a timer. I'm taking 10 minutes to talk about how much I fucking hate towering. We talked about it. I was bitching about that fucking Knights battle cannon back when we saw it first, and the fact that they showed towering and that there's nowhere you can hide. The greatest impact of 9th edition was the obscuring keyword for terrain. Because the fact of the matter is, no one has ever had good terrain. We think back to 5th edition, people will throw a couple of those battlefield in a box runes, and line of sight terrain didn't exist. You were either hobbled by range, hoping you could outrange people, and on the 6x4 that was a bit easier, or it just didn't fucking exist. You got shot off the table. The leaf blower list existed because there wasn't enough line of sight blocking terrain. I don't know who in their right mind thought that giving knights the ability to ignore all terrain all the time was a good idea, because it's not. Because everyone, all tournaments, the LVO, Bay Area Open, all the big ones, all our local ones, my own personal terrain, has been built with that obscuring keyword in mind. The Games Workshop terrain, with all their little windows, has been built with the obscuring keyword in mind. And as soon as you take away that, and you start playing with true LOS again, with these huge 70-foot models that can see the entirety of the game from one spot, it's not fun. They're going to blow shit off the table. They're going to be wildly overpowered. And like, here we're picking on knights, but the greatest defender is the Wraith Knight. And I love Eldar. I have wanted the Wraith Knight to be good since it was so good it made people rage quit.
In 7th, yeah.
In 7th. And like, it has paid 2 editions for its sins. No one has played one since, except for boons for fun at tournaments because you didn't want to win for some reason. But towering is bad. It's that thing that I talked about earlier, that I said the things that make the 10th edition require improvement is uninteractivity. When you can't hide from your opponent, when you can't play around them, when you can't make tactical decisions because they can still see you, the game isn't interactive. And that's where the problem boils down to. Towering doesn't make it an interactive game. Now, I acknowledge, again, I got 7 minutes left. I acknowledge again that Knight players have been bitching about the inverse of this. That the game was not interactive for them in 8th. Right? Maybe they should have benefited from obscuring. I don't know. I fucking hate Knights. I don't think they should have at all. They have their own game called Titanicus. Play that! They can play fucking Epic. They can play Titanicus. They can play fucking literally anything. Stompy Robots.
Mech Warrior. Yeah.
Mech Warrior.
Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Anything.
Yeah.
Knights isn't 40k, man. Towering's a
have
problem.
anything to add?
Towering's a problem. Bill.
Well, yes, I can see why towering is an issue. I do think that you can fix it, or they could have fixed it easy. Like I don't think giving knights obscuring would have been that bad of a thing to make it go both ways. I also think towering is a way that it'll keep TOs honest in sense of updating your tables and making your stuff better. Like just blanket calling, line of sight blocking on bottom floor, I don't think is actually going to solve the issue. I think you're going to have to really retrofit some terrain to make sure like your first and second floors are fairly blocked. Maybe not full, but pretty damn close, just because you don't want to create that feels bad. And I know I've been already kind of looking at terrain, racking my brain on how are we going to improve the terrain situation with Trident events to make sure that it's not blowouts with knights and to give people the best gameplay that they can actually have. So I do think it puts a lot of onus on the TOs to get your shit together and make the terrain as best as you can, especially if you know there's going to be issues with certain models. Indirect stuff, that's a whole nother ball game I won't even get into right now, but that's kind of my thoughts on towering.
Do they have like towering or that kind of equivalent or obscuring for that matter in 30k?
No, essentially everything that's cover is cover. There's very few and far in between things that do ignore cover.
Sure.
Generally short ranged, but again, knights in Heresy are also benefiting from cover. I think an easy fix would have just been have obscuring swing both ways and call it good personally. So,
well, the thing about that as a fix is that if knights come out to shoot because they want to shoot, they're paying a lot of points for those models. You can see them back. But like, even if we do that route, if we fix up terrain to make the bottom floor and the second floor and the top floor LOS blocking, the runes just aren't big enough. Like, infantry will get cover, but now with the rules for like how vehicles have to be wholly within terrain and shit, they're not going to get cover. When the fuck is this fire prism going to fit inside a rune, or not be able to seen by a knight? So what's going to happen if you play knights and you have anti-tank? You have to throw it in strategic.
Yeah.
And then you have to hope you ace it on a turn, and they're just going to rotate ion shields, then shoot you anyway.
Yeah, I actually agree a lot with what you guys are saying. Here's the thing. I get where you're coming from, Bill, there, and I do think one thing I will say about TOs in general, as a species, TOs and event runners, like, they honestly helped make Ninth as good as it was with the way that they eventually figured out terrain, because it really was the events that figured out terrain, not GW. Yeah. GW ended up kind of falling in line after enough events where, like, yeah, your game's busted, it's way too lethal, we need to do obscuring, we need to do do a lot of obscuring, we need to make terrain certain shapes, certain amounts and stuff, because I don't know if you guys remember, but like the early Ninth, GW suggestions were crap. They had the right rules in there, but they didn't really use them properly. And it was really the community that came around and figured out how to make it work. And I think that maybe GW going into 10th, because they wanted the game to be less lethal, and in many ways, certainly not all, but in many ways it is, maybe they started to think, well, maybe we can give some of these big models a break so that they don't have to suffer from this obscuring issue anymore. But clearly, when they actually wrote the rules for most of those models, they were on crack. They were absolutely flipping out of their minds, because some of these models really do. They really do put out just an insane amount of shooting, and especially when you consider that half the time, here's the thing: like, you're big, you have to have units in your army that can handle getting shot by a knight. But at the end of the day, those aren't even really what you're trying to hide. The problem is that being able to see through runes and stuff means that the knights can also shoot whatever it is you are trying to hide, because you have lots of little fragile units which are actually really important to your army, that the only way to keep them alive was to hide them. I've watched a few games on stream from various, groups, and like, honestly, to make this work, some of them are using almost exclusively huge L's, huge thin L's, which are completely LOS blocking, but are also thin enough that the models can get around them very easily. And that's the only way that they're having, being able to curve in knights and wraith knights and all that crap, is because they have this very specific type of terrain, which we all agree are awesome, but maybe even sort of too awesome sometimes. They're almost too good of defense. But against knights, they're just needed, because anything, like Arthur said, that's bigger can be, or not shaped the right way, can be really problematic. I do agree a little bit that maybe we could also go back the other way and say, like, just delete towering as a word, and maybe let knights have obscuring. I mean, little, like, armigers and war dogs get it anyway. They always have. Yeah. And they're a big part of the knights' armies. So maybe just letting the big knights have the ability to hide, if they can find something big enough to hide behind, is not the end of the world, because that's probably only one piece per table, maybe two. So it's not a huge deal. At the same time, knights are also very tough now. So, like, I don't know.
When we talk about terrain in general, Bill, I think it'd be fair to say that you not throwing shade here, because of the heresy games you've run and the different systems you've run, I would classify you more as a narrative player than I would classify you as a competitive player. Scotty, I would classify you more as a competitive player than a narrative player, and I think I'm in that boat too.
What? Why?
I'm narrative as fuck. I'm not trying to throw shade. What makes the best table? Like, what is the table that you want to play on?
Bill's got a few. Like, honestly, so like, come out to a Trident event, and I will walk you around, whoever you might be who's listening, walk you around to a few tables that I'm like, this is a damn near perfect table.
Now, it on should that have table, whatever it is. Does towering make that table not perfect anymore? Yeah. So towering is the problem.
Bill, yeah, it's definitely a problem.
Your favorite table, what does it look like?
Depends if we're strictly going on like for based on heresy,
Whatever
just
type
for
of Warhammer
40K?
that you want to play the most, whatever you have the most fun playing.
Yeah. Well, currently, just because I don't have any games of 10th in, like, obviously, I'm a big advocate for heresy, and I really like the system. Having just a general thematic build, point in time story setting area where you get to actually deploy, and it looks like you're kind of taking part in like a massive, a bigger battle. Where
Like right out of a White Dwarf.
yeah, it looks awesome, right? Like that's definitely some of the fun.
Does
you can
Towering
have.
break that for you?
Towering could for sure. It's weird because in Heresy we have knights too, and there's no real issue. Like, yes, they can be a little oppressive, but it's not the big knights that are doing it. It's the little guys that are always causing the issues anyways. So it's just it's kind of weird. Even in 2.0, they're not as lethal as they were back in first edition. So
No Wraith Knights.
no, but being able to see through all the cover and ignore, I think that's kind of the issue. Is
Wraith Knight.
at least in Heresy, everything's giving you a cover save. So whether you can see me or not, at least I'm getting cover, getting that chance. Is that enough to make knights, not as bad? I don't know.
Well,
It depends what their weapon loadouts are like. It depends what I'm rocking with. If I'm rolling in flak or my dirty old like Drakari armor 4+, it's not worth shit. So it's pretty tough to stand up to a lot of shooting like that.
I could bitch about Knights and Towering all day, and we'll throw it back to Scotty. That we got more topics to go.
Yeah.
In 10th, some of the Knights, they can have pretty good firepower. So the next two, we're gonna do.
Cannon.
That's not even the gun that scares me. There's a pair of rules which we're going to talk about, but we're actually not going to talk about what's wrong with or what specifically is wrong with the rule, because we all know what's wrong with the rule. Everybody who's played for more than about 5 minutes knows what's wrong with this rule. There's two. We're going to do one after the other. So instead of asking you guys what you like or don't like about this rule, strictly don't like, let's be honest. Instead, what I'm going to ask you is, how does GW continue to fuck this up? We're going to start with indirect fire. So I'm going to ask Arthur, we know that indirect fire intent is fucked. How does GW edition after edition fuck this up again and again and again, and then fix it, and then come back and fuck it up again?
Well, I mean, sometimes they don't even fix it. A lot of the time, it's players who create rulings who fix it. I think back to 6th and 7th when we had these pie plates from the forge-rolled artillery carriages that were AP3, or the Whirlwind Scorpiuses were AP3, and there were some AP2 pie plates coming down. They would put that shit on your squad, and you just pick your shit up, and it didn't matter. And then when the D cannons came out in late 7th, and the Warp Hunter did their thing, that was even worse. Nobody enjoys playing against that. It's not fun. I don't know how GW keeps coming up. Like, do they not play this fucking game? Once again, the problem is uninteractivity. And when we had blast templates, you could pray it was going to miss. But then they got to flip it, and there were the stupid guard, not Hydras.
The Manticores. The other one.
Wyverns.
Yeah. Fucking. My next guess was Chimera.
We're getting there.
We're getting there. They didn't miss.
Yeah.
And now we have indirect, where there was a penalty before, where there was a time in 8th when it was really fucking good. Games Workshop dialed it down a bit. They took an AP away. They made it -1 to hit, and they gave you cover, which was effectively giving you +2 AP. And people stopped playing it almost overnight until some data sheets got a little bit out of hand and didn't care about that because of a Space Marine buff. So, I don't know. It's not fun to play against.
It's
I don't know how they fuck it up. And I don't know how they fix it, because they've already input the buff or the negative side effects that they put in 8th, but now they give you the ability to remove it. And are they going to remove the heavy keyword from every source of indirect in the game? Probably not.
Bill?
I don't know how they keep fucking it up. Bill?
Indirect definitely can be an issue. A simple fix would just be to not be able to remove the penalties. Always make it a -1 no matter what. Or state as it could not hit on better than a 4+ no matter what, or 5+ no matter what.
No rerolls, because the most offensive indirect has rerolls. I'm talking Oath of Moment. I'm talking fucking Eldar Boogaloo Magic where you get to reroll dice? Like,
Guide, yeah.
It's it's definitely going to be a little bit of an issue. It's always going to need a tweak to fix it, especially coming like from an army that doesn't have indirect. I think I'll feel the pinch on that quite a bit. It'll probably make me want to play indirect, which I don't think that's the answer either. I think that's just trying to hurt somebody because they hurt me. So I don't know. I'm hoping it gets kind of addressed or fixed a little bit. It just would only take a quick errata, right? Just say, hey, can never hit better on a 4-up, and you don't get any rerolls or ways to ignore it. That'd be pretty decent.
That is the silver lining, and for a couple of these rules, really, is that they are, compared to some issues in the game, they're very easy to fix with like a single data. In fact, GW largely fixed indirect last edition with a single data slate, and where they brought in the penalties.
They fixed Death Watch in days.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
So like, it's possible. I think actually it's probable that it gets fixed. It's a question of how long. I honestly, the reason I asked this question is I don't have an answer for it. I do not know how they keep fucking this up.
Until they hit their sales cap on Desolators, that's when they'll...
Maybe, I guess. Like, to me, like, yeah, a few things that come to mind is, yeah, the obvious, the number of data slates that have indirect and also have a way to ignore one or both penalties is crazy. In ninth, like, it was actually very nuanced that they made it a minus to your ballistic skill instead of a minus to your hit roll, because that meant it could stack with a -1 to hit, which was one nice piece of counterplay against it, and making it so that it gave an extra point of armor to the unit was also nice, because again, that can actually stack with cover. Then this edition, here they go and they throw that all out. It's a -1 to hit and gives cover, which means having cover and a -1 to hit doesn't do anything, because that's what it's already doing. And then half the data slates ignore those anyway. We've got, part of the reason with the Imp Guard, some of the hype is all about their indirect, because they can literally make their 4+ ballistic skill tanks hit on 2s while indirect firing. Like, that's...
have one tank, they're going to have fucking 5.
That's, yeah, like, that's kind of problematic. So yeah, and like Arthur said, the big issue with indirect has always been a lack of interactivity. This is, I would argue, the most interactive set of rules we've almost ever had, but this specific thing is problematic, and it always has been problematic. And there actually are ways to fix it. Some of you guys are throwing out good ideas, no rerolls, maybe some sort of auto-fail or caps on how good it can get, or maybe just not being able to ignore the penalties. We'll see what GW does. But it is flippin' stupid. In that same vein, we have another keyword, or rule, I should say, that is not new, but has existed before in one form or another. And again, I'm going to ask you guys, how does GW keep fucking up lone operative? Like, they've had this before, where models were just untargetable for some reason. And now we've got it again. And then they've always had to at some point change it so that it had like a range on it, like they had to be within a few inches of something to actually get it, or you could, get around it with snipers or something like that. Not the case right now. Thoughts, Arthur?
I think back to I loved 7th edition Warhammer, and if you played Heresy, you also loved 7th edition Warhammer. But there isn't a single person on the planet that liked the psychic power invisibility. Which essentially made your unit only be able to hit on 6s, and then immune to like other weaponry. Effectively, as Scotty said, is untargetable. When we think about that, it was removed in 8th, and the community rejoiced. But then they introduced like assassins who couldn't be hit unless they were the closest, and these characters who couldn't be hit, and there were situations where some characters could block for others, so neither could be targetable. And while Games Workshop was relatively, for them at the time, quick to address that, it created situations where, once again, we can't interact with the opponent. I think this is just an example of them wanting you to have like cool skirmishy units. Like, there is an Eldar sniper who gives it to his unit. And you know what? There's something to be said about this, like these snipers out in the corner with their camo cloaks that are hard to see, that you can't really shoot at. Like, that kind of makes sense to me. But from a gameplay perspective, it's not interactive. Anything that reduces interactivity is bad for the game. In whatever sense that is. Whether that's not being able to be targeted, such as in Lone Operative outside of 12, whether that is Bellacor's old rules where he was fucking impossible to kill, right? And anything that, like, the Iron Hands Dreadnought that used to reduce damage and then reduce it more and then pass it off. It created a situation where you couldn't interact with that model. And that's the problem. It's uninteractivity. It has nothing to do with anything else. If you make something uninteractive, if your core rule makes it uninteractive, it's not fun to play against, I guess, because people will sure fucking have fun playing it. And that's where it comes down to. Bill.
I don't know. I keep trying to wrap my head around how it all is supposed to be a benefit for the game. And it's, I don't know. I'm not sure what the best way, how to even fix that. That's what I would rather focus on is how could we fix it to make it where it just doesn't apply like that. Make it where characters can't cover for characters. And what's the best?
Among other things, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the thing is, there are a lot of fixes to it. We're literally just talking about the character rules.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at 9th, no characters couldn't join units, of course. So, like, honestly, Look Out Sir was fine.
Yeah.
Like, Look Out Sir is probably what Lone Operative should be. Like, if you were looking for an easy template.
Yeah.
Like, really, think about it. That, like, those character rules worked fine across most armies for the entire edition. And they were fine. Maybe there's cases where you might want to adjust it a bit. Like, I mean, then we can debate the partial merits of, like, semi-lone operative. Like, I know some units have, like, an 18-inch lone operative instead of a 12. That's a little bit more interactive. We also can think about who gets it. Part of the issue with lone operative being 12 inches isn't even just how hard it can be to track down that unit to attack it. There's a few lone operatives that are actually not shooting units; they're combat units.
Lionel Johnson.
That's a huge deal. Like, at least if you chase down a ghost keel and you want to light it up, it doesn't want to stay there. It wants to run away. So, like, you kind of create a cat and mouse game. With Lionel Johnson or any of the other lone operatives that are built for combat, they're just invulnerable until they get to combat. Because, like, as soon as you're within 12 inches, like, you're gonna get you next turn.
Yeah.
Like, so, like, bring him down and all his buddies.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, that feels bad, and like you say, that's incredibly uninteractive. As awesome as it is for those models, and especially, like, the other thing, of course, is like, wow, why can't we even shoot snipers at them? Not that snipers would take out Lionel Johnson, but, like, at least it's something. So it's another kind of mystery. Wounds. I mean, some of them do. That's true. I guess. I mean, maybe if they got some Pete dice, maybe. But yeah, it's just it's another one of those mystery rules that you kind of hope. The nice thing is that it's fixable with a simple FAQ, and maybe it gets changed relatively quickly. We hope. But in its current form, it's hilarious, especially the completely unbound ones where, like, some of them it's like you have to be within 3 or 6 inches of somebody to get it. Some units literally is just, I'm just a lone operative. I'll go sit on that objective in the back corner for the entire game and you can't do anything about it.
Sure. The Eldar have an Autarch that has wings that has that.
And how much does he cost? 80 points?
100 points, 80 points, something
maybe,
like that. Yeah.
It's mine. And if you can't get here, you can't have it. You can't take me off of it. It's like, all right, well, that sucks.
There might be a world actually where that actually makes having a deep strike unit, which is more rare than it was, valuable.
Yeah, oh, for sure. There is some counterplay, don't get me wrong. But
like, it's still not an intuitive system. I know what you're saying.
It's uninteractive, like you say. We have one more rule that is a little bit more of a discussion, and I know everybody's got wonderful hot takes on this one. This is bad. Not bad. I don't think this is bad rule design. I think it's bad implementation. I think GW just went off script on where they handed this rule out, despite the fact that I think it's pretty cool and flavorful. And I think that some of the big issues here is that this rule seems to be doing a big job of stratifying the indexes for the haves and the have-nots, because some armies don't have much of this rule. And that directly impacts their ability to play the game, and some armies have too much of this rule. And that rule, of course, is devastating wounds. So like let's just hear some thoughts, not just thoughts on how to fix it, but because I mean that's going to be the main topic, but also, like, if you'd like to see a change in the implementation, not just changing the rule, but where should it actually go? Should we have less of it? Should we have maybe more of it? What? So we'll start with Arthur.
I actually think that devastating wounds as a mechanic is cool. However, being able to trigger it in certain ways might be problematic. Like, I mean, Eldar and Thousand Suns are going to be the ones that get the most shit for it. Eldar because they have the fate dice to make everything a 6. Thousand Suns for the other things they do. But anything with the anti-keyword that auto counts as 6s, that's also kind of a problem. So the problem isn't being able to do mortals. The problem is the reliability of being able to do mortals. So if we had devastating wounds as they are, then if we had some sort of thing that is on only natural rolls of 6, not unmodified, not fate dice, not anything else, that might not be as problematic. That takes out some of the key lag. It doesn't take out all of them. Is it possessed that put out dev wounds, or they just do everything else?
I think it's possessed can do death wounds,
right.
if I remember correctly.
But like only on 6s. They're a unit that is going to slap in combat, but they got to roll some 6s. Yeah. I like rolling 6s as a mechanic. I loved Hail of Doom. I love the old Shuriken rule. It makes it both exciting and terrifying when you see a 6. But if you can just be like, okay, well, here's 2d6 mortals because you have fate dice in the bank, and now Mortarian's taken 18 mortals before he can shoot you back in an Overwatch phase because you have more fate dice in the bank, then you're not always going to have those 6s, but you're going to have some when it matters. That's not fun. But there should be a rule for when you have something so deadly that it does such grievous damage that something happens to it. There are a lot of Tau players right now that are lamenting the loss of railguns. Because now people get to make saves against these one-shot abilities that hit on a 4. And, like, I feel that. I don't know if you should be able to take a save. I don't know what to do about that, though.
What is your... Do you have a dream version of Devastating Wounds?
You know, I feel like... So, to really unanswer that question, you have to go through the history of Devastating Wounds. In early 8th edition, we had damage abilities that did an extra damage on 6s. This was the first episode of a Devastating Wound we had. That ended up being a score-keeping nightmare for when you receive wounds. Because if you were a multi-wound model, and everything was 1 damage, but 6s do 2 damage, you are never going to take them in a way that is not unfavorable to you. You're going to like take a 1, and then you're going to take a 2er, and then you're going to take another 1, and then you're going to take a 2er. So it creates a system that's exploitive unless you're rolling dice 1 at a time, which is not intuitive for the system. So Games Workshop acknowledged that. They didn't FAQ anything, but what they did was in their next release window of codexes, Wounds started doing a mortal in addition, which solves that whole problem. You're taking all your wounds, and then you take the mortals in addition. Now, I don't know why that was problematic. I'm sure that it is for things like Possessed, which are going to proc 1 billion wounds, and I'm not shitting on Possessed. Possessed are fine. Chaos Space Marines is a good codex. It is not currently one of the ones that is problematic. If everything else gets nerfed, we can then bitch about them, but I don't even think they'll be the ones that bitch because they typically play a relatively fair game without amazing amounts of anti and devastating wounds. They have some.
Way out of character for them. Fair game.
Well, there's that.
Immersion broken.
Immersion broken.
So that's you don't 100% know that there is a ideal way for dev wounds?
The only thing I can think of is that it does a mortal in addition. But at the same time, you know what I really liked? And everyone's going to hate me for this. Back in 7th edition, when you got to roll out that D shot, and on a 6, people just had to remove their shit, pick it up off the table, take it home, burn it, throw it in the trash, shove it up your ass. That was so fun! That was
fucked.
It's almost like he played the faction with all the D weapons. It's crazy.
No doubt.
True. Other people had D weapons.
Bill, what are your thoughts on
for talking about, not being good for interaction for the game? That's what the old Destroyer shit was.
Yeah.
It just led to feel bads.
It did.
You could roll lookout sirs.
Yeah.
And then pick your other shit.
We don't have lookouts there. We have lone operatives. Can D weapons hit lone operatives? If they can, we'll bring them back.
No, but Doombolt can.
There you go. That's fair.
That's fucking stupid.
And it does start with a D, so that's good.
That's what it's all about. The devastating wounds. My only gripe, if you will, is essentially it's not handed out on an equitable basis amongst armies. And I think that's kind of the big issue is if every army had 3 units that all had devastating, I don't think it would be a problem. But there's some units, some armies that only have like 1.
But then people are only going to play the units that have devastating.
You very well may, but you
internal balance instead of external. But
and they can tweak the points. They can make points more expensive if you want to play a higher lethality force, like more elite. That's fine. It's easy to fix. Like, gotta pay extra.
Yeah, there's ways they can tweak that. Yeah.
So,
Bill, are scourges a problem? They have anti and dev wounds, right?
They have on the Jukari Haywire Blaster, yes.
Oh, on that, yeah.
Anti-vehicle 4+, and devastating wounds.
Okay.
Are they a problem? They probably will be.
You think so?
Well, 3 times 5 squads in your army at least. I just bought
There'll
another
be a
squad.
night player who's bad.
What's the range on that?
On the Haywire Blaster, 24.
Yeah. And does it require line of sight?
Yeah, it does.
Oh,
So there is some interactivity with it. And the other part about that, it's only anti-vehicle.
It is.
Yeah. I'll say for Scourges, to be fair, they do have a high movement and fly, and also do have the ability to jump, shoot, jump.
They do.
So they might not be quite as interactive as you think. Although, to be fair, like the flip side is they are very fragile when you can get on top of them.
And not interactive.
They're anti-vehicle, and it costs you a CP, so like there are costs to doing it. Yeah, I have seen. I mean, Dev Wounds is probably like the most fierce battleground of almost anything right now that I've seen, compared to these other issues. Just because there doesn't seem to be as clear of a consensus about what to do. Because I think the reality is that a lot of people actually do like the concept, and we're used to playing with the concept. And 10th edition has, and I think this was GW kind of thinking ahead a bit. 10th edition has seen a resurgence in feel no pain type rules. They never went away, but like they're pretty generous across a lot of books. But they still do not make up for the more egregious devastating wounds. I think Arthur's suggestion, the swapping it to +1 mortal, added onto your regular damage, probably the most common one, and I don't hate it. I am a little bit iffy about it just because I think that there still needs to be some editing done if we were to do that. Because whilst that does solve the problem of Wraith cannons and stuff, it doesn't necessarily solve the issue of like the, smaller squads who just dish out a bunch of shots that each have 1 damage and do devastating wounds. Because then those actually get stronger. Those are getting a mortal wound on top of their regular damage now instead of just a mortal wound. So those are potentially still a sore point, but those are fewer and far between. Ideally, to me, I think there's a couple ways. I mean, one, I saw somebody suggest just capping it. So like, a unit can only suffer so many devastating wounds per phase, or a unit can only deal so many devastating wounds per phase, and after that, they revert to just regular wounds. I've seen people suggest that like you deal in addition to damage, but also have the caps. I've seen people say, because here's one of the other issues, like Arthur mentioned, fate dice is a big issue. Part of that would just be making things like fate dice and miracle dice and stuff count as a modified dice. So therefore, it's not an unmodified 6. It's a modified.
People hate fate dice if they couldn't proc dev wounds.
Not as much, although they're still pretty strong. I have thoughts on them too. And then the other thing is, because here's the other flip side, even without fate dice, there's some armies that really chuck out a bunch of dev wounds because of combos like being able to reroll wounds, and maybe even stacking that with getting critical wounds on a 5-up. Both of those, and especially those together, can also mean that you're just spitting out insane amounts of 6s, which proc the dev wounds. So they've said, like, maybe a dev wound has to be a non-rerolled dice. The rerolls don't get you dev wounds. And get rid of all these stupid, not all, but, the few times that there's a critical wounds on a 5+, that's a stupid fucking roll. Because it makes dev wounds incredibly, incredibly common.
I don't know if I
So
like
a lot of
the
ideas.
no reroll aspect, because I'm thinking back to 9th edition Striking Scorpions, who are not very striking. They're kind of ugly. But they had dice that could proc extra attacks, but those attacks couldn't proc mortals. And it was kind of fucking stupid to have like this separate pile of attacks you have to track differently that didn't interact. But I don't otherwise hate that idea.
Like, it's just kind of your original 6s that count, and then after that, you know.
Yeah.
And again, these are all just ideas. I don't think there's a one right way forward, but I think we all agree that something has to happen. The easiest ones to fix are just the fate dice. I mean, I don't want to pick on Eldar, but like that's the easiest one in the world to make. Just make them count as a modified die. Another thing that would help with fate dice a lot, and this is actually goes back to Arthur's question there about would people still hate them? We have miracle dice in this game, and they're still a very strong mechanic. And they have this rule, and they always have, which is that a unit can only use one per phase. Fate dice should be the same. That's part of the thing that breaks fate dice, is that you can create an outrageously huge swing by just picking. Now, this wasn't true in 9th edition so much because you only got 4 or 5 of them. But right now, at the start of the game, you got a big brick of frickin' dice, and you're just like, there's a whole bunch of hits or wounds or God only knows what. Actually, same thing for saves. Like a Wraith Knight can literally go and drop a bunch of 6s to blow some stuff up, and you maybe have a big swing back, and they have a bunch of 4s and 5s that they can use for saves. That creates a big bad feel bad.
There's only so many dice that are even going to get to that wound step because it's T12.
Yeah, that's
I want the Wraith
kind of
Knight
the
to be
thing.
good. I do.
I do too. I do. But it's a little too good.
It's a little too good.
But fate dice are part of the why.
Uninteractivity.
Well, and like they'd still be a good mechanic if you can only use one per phase. Like,
Yeah.
and they would that alone would instantly make the Wraith Knight still good, but like it's not going to be like I'm going to roll my hits and then here's 3 6s. Like, no, here's 1 6, which still sucks. It's a lot of mortals. Maybe he naturally rolls 1 2. Who knows? Or re-rolls or whatever. Then the same thing when you go after an avatar and it's just like, well, here's 5 4+, and I'm going to roll the last one. You know, so but that's just fate dice. We're getting off topic. Those do need to be fixed too. But dev wounds have a lot of solutions, and GW is going to have to find one of them, or 2 of them, or more. But they are a good mechanic. They are a cool mechanic that should absolutely be in the game.
Do you think we're going to see a day 1 index fact?
I'm really hoping so, but I'm not sure that we will. I think GW's rules writers have probably been through a lot. Here's the thing: I wouldn't be shocked if we did, but I would assume that the earliest FAQ or errata is literally just erratas because they have so many data sheets that
getting
have
4 star cannon shots.
Oh, and that happened on a bunch of Marine and Guard tanks too that I've seen, where they just had weapons that have improper numbers, different stat lines from one thing to another, some of which are intentional, I know, but a lot of which aren't, or like a rules written missing a word, and that completely changes how it functions, or something's missing a keyword. I would not be surprised if there was a very early errata for that. But actual like game affecting rules changes, like I hope so. I think we'll get them soon. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a month out or 6 weeks, 8 weeks out. Hopefully before Iron Within. But will it come that quick? I mean, a lot of people are very hopeful because of the Deathwatch FAQ. But I don't know if we can ask for that on like a game-wide scale.
Well, if we have this, we are off topic. One of the ideas had, and I'd like to see if you thought something similar for Heresy Bill. Scotty had this idea that there is not like one unified rules team, but there is rather like 8 or however many writers that each write their individual books or series of books, and that's why we have Death Guard, Votan, Admech, and Sisters of Battle at the absolute bottom, with Sisters being probably the worst. And Eldar in their natural place where they belong. Is it like, if we have all of these rules writers on their own separate things, are we likely to see all 20 something factions get a rework? Does that happen for Heresy Build? Like, does it seem like there's there was 20 legions, 18 I guess?
It very much feels for Heresy like there were multiple writers that were all involved. and it's probably very similar to what 40k ended up doing. The only thing is with Heresy, they were able to, how can I word this? They were able to use COVID as kind of the excuse because no one was able to get together, and everyone worked on their own papers for 2 years, and then leaks started dropping, and everyone handed it in at the end, and that's what we got. You can tell some books are not created, books are not created equally. A lot of the legions aren't created equally, and I'm not sure what the story was there. A lot play better than they did because they play more true to the fluff of how they feel in the fluff is translated well into the rules or the legion mechanics.
So are Ultramarines just the fucking best?
Well, Ultramarines are pretty good. What makes Ultramarines a little bit too heavy-handed is these. There was like a PDF Legacies style units that you could use for all your games, and some of them were a little out to lunch for sure.
Like Horde World.
Well, yeah, just worse.
Horde World has never once made Games Workshop stuff out of whack. Never once. Just
not ideal. But I do think that 10th does seem to be having a little bit of that issue. You might have had like a Xenos team, an Imperial team, and whatever, and guys just kind of took whatever piqued their interest. They made their factions and all kind of pushed it in.
There was one team who obviously did Sisters of Battle, AdMech, and Death Guard at the same time. And that's funny because those were made by the same team in 9th edition as well.
If Sisters were made alongside anybody, I'd think it was Votan. They share a lot of the same rules. I did hear one, this is tinfoil hat time, so everybody strap on.
Put it on.
But I saw one thing said that actually maybe does make some sense, and that's that there are rumors that this is actually true, that some of GW's rules readings teams literally not just don't communicate with each other, but actively are not allowed to communicate with each other. Which again is less of a problem like in 9th where it's one book after another, because it's not like they can't just go back and read all the other books. So they didn't have an excuse. But for the indexes where you're having a whole bunch of stuff written at the same time, it would have been really good for them to talk to each other. And the rules, the alleged rumors, is that a lot of this went back to the issues that GW has had with leaks and their efforts to try to stop stuff from getting leaked. And I mean, admittedly, it's true that a good way to do that is to just not be able, for certain people to not be able to access certain information. You limit how much information any one person can have, and it also helps you track if there is a leak, narrow down where that is, instead of having, a big design team with dozens of people and making that harder. But of course, it does mean that, like we see the indexes that are bad and ones that are very good, and honestly, a lot that are in the middle. I honestly think there are a lot of books that actually are good. Like they could use a little help here or there, or some nerfing, whatever. But like the vast majority of books are still pretty good. We just some bad outliers.
There are a lot of books that play this game fair, and as much as I've been harping on Sisters of Battle, they play the game fair. They play an interactive game where they want people to come to them. But in the premise of what we're looking at for this edition, that's not what makes an army good. Right?
No, it's BS, yeah. And Sisters even have fate dice, so fate dice can be balanced.
It's true. It's true.
Does anyone have some closing thoughts? A little something. I said I wanted to cover just a couple of topics today that have been really popular in the news, as well as a few that, like I said, with missions, just nobody seems to be talking about at all. But is there something near and dear to either of your hearts that you want to mention before we close out?
Bill, you, me, you.
My only I have a comment. It's just on lethality. While it seems like AP and damage has gone down across the board on most things, the game does feel more killy to me, anyways, in terms of what I saw for 9th and like what I'm seeing for 10th. Like for my Drukhari personally, I'm looking at all these other like armies of what they can do, and I'm like, if I can't hide, I'm pretty much gonna die. And I was like,
may I offer a piece of insight?
Sure, yeah.
Is it possible that you feel that way because you've played Power Armor or better your entire life and are just now starting to play T3 paper armored boys
Well, you're not wrong.
and girls?
You're not wrong.
And girls.
And that's probably why I might feel like it's so fragile.
Sorry, go ahead.
There are reasons why. That would probably be an accurate guess.
My general, so I've spent too many hours on the excellent tool Unit Crunch, which you can access for free online if you ever want to do some 40k simming, just to try to give myself an idea if the game actually was more or less lethal. Running through dozens of data sheets now, just inputting them and simming them against each other to see what kind of damage output different things had into different other things. And I will say that in general, I actually do think that the game is less lethal. I think a huge piece of that is just the way cover works now. But just in general, my instinct has been that it is less lethal. Arthur can tell you how I was basically crowing in chat when I did the math and found out that a double battle cannon, Chaos Knight or whatever, literally only kills like 6 or 7 battle sisters. I was just like, what? No, that doesn't make sense. This knight's supposed to be terrifying, and it is, but like it also literally kills 50 or 60 points of toughness 3 models in the right situations. But I think that you're actually right, Bill, and that there are outliers in this game that you hear a lot about when you're reading online or whatever, or talking to your friends, that absolutely are not less killy, and in some cases are actually more killy than 9th, which was the killiest edition of 40k we've ever had. And those units are kind of ruining it for everybody else because their damage output is insane, and needs to be reined in. And it does, I mean, to be fair, it kind of does crump it, especially for the softer armies. Because there are some armies right now that people think are decent or at least playable, and actually the only thing about them is that they can walk out into the middle of the table and not immediately die. And that's what's making them playable. Not good, but playable.
Are you talking about Necrons?
There's a couple, honestly. Like I'd even say Chaos Space Marines are a bit like that. Some of the specific Space Marine chapters are pretty tanky as well, even if they don't do much else. Knights, to an extent, actually, are kind of the same thing. Though that kind of depends on how the anti-vehicle meta shakes up. But yeah, those toughness 3 armies, they might be in for a tough go.
It's definitely, that's how it feels for me anyways, just in regards to how it goes. Although myself knowing how like the 8th edition indexes and everything went, or was it 8th? Yeah, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The indexes and the codex that followed after was vastly different. So I do suspect, even though things might be just right now off the chain and some factions are like stupid good and some aren't, that I'm hoping will get balanced out as the codexes drop and as they get data from all these events, because it won't be hard to see once they start actually reviewing that stuff. I think it'll be pretty quick for them to make changes. At least that's my thought.
There's no shortage of feedback online, so
yeah.
Arthur, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really important to, and Scotty might laugh as I say this, to treat this as a new edition. I have had probably the worst time trying to, and I've mentioned a couple times, and some of it's been a jest, fucking around with the Sister of Battle list. Ever since I saw their index released, I've been pretty dooming over them. Now the truth is, like, they're not bad, but like when you compare the old stats to the new stats and what you're going to kill, it's not the same game. So you have to really accept that. And that can be tough to accept. I still don't accept it. I don't want to. I really don't. I want to look at my shit and be like, this isn't going to do it. And maybe some of that's true. Maybe I'm out to lunch on some aspects, but dooming about it is not the answer. We are in a new edition of Warhammer. We're going to have new winners. There are going to be some new top tier, right? There's going to be some stuff changed. And you honestly just have to enjoy playing the game. So sometimes the healthy thing is to get off Reddit, get off Warhammer community, get off the Art of War thing. Stop worrying about what the best wombo combo you can roll out to your Thursday night Warhammer is, and just find some models you like, put those on the table, and play them.
Yeah, especially when you're learning the game or learning a new edition, because we're all gonna fuck up anyway.
That's it. Don't worry about, well, will I be able to do this or do that? Just play models, and if you lose a game, that's okay. That's okay. You're gonna lose some games. The my favorite analogy to tell students is that what's some of the best people who hit baseballs in the MLB hit 3 out of 10 times, right? And some of the best teams win 6 out of 10 times or whatever, right? So you don't need to win every game. You can lose half your games. You can lose more than that, and you'll still have a good time playing the game. The game isn't just about winning. We play it to have fun. We play it because we like painting. We play it because we like the universe. You have to embody that spirit.
It's about getting that top painted tier. Knocking that Eldar motherfucker off the throne.
It's Eldar Supremacy Week.
It's all Eldar in the end.
Well, I hope so.
And I would say, and we've referenced this a few times over the podcast, literally, like, realistically, in 3 to 6 months, a lot of the issues will be corrected. There will almost certainly be new issues. But as we saw with 9th, the issues will get less and less and less. They will be smaller. There will be fewer of them. In 3 to 6 months, this may be the best edition of Warhammer 40k ever.
Until the new codex starts coming out.
I mean, the GW said that they don't want to even have to change their data slates. These were all designed to be almost perfect, and they intend to make as few changes as possible. They may be reconsidering how many changes that is at this point, but we'll see.
I hope they change as few as possible in Eldar.
I bet.
Just increase the points across the board. It'll be fine.
Points doesn't fix it.
Quarterly point changes. Yeah, I agree. Points doesn't necessarily change it, but that's what they're saying. Quarterly point changes. So things will be finely tuned on that front at the least. 800 point Wraith Knight, here we come.
There we go.
It has to be cost comparable to an Imperial Knight.
That's still like 500 points.
Stompa used to be like 850.
The fucking Stompa is still 800 points.
Yeah, that's pointed appropriately, man. That's good.
It's not.
No, the Stompa's never been a good cost. Not since fucking 5th.
That's not true.
Let the Orc player in here.
It was really fucking good.
Well, it was the static one wasn't the Forge World one. The Big Mech Stompa was the good one. Yeah, that was bullshit.
It had some D on it. Fucking slanging everywhere.
It did have a D on it.
Slanging D, yeah.
Bill's gonna
TWC.
Bill's gonna throw his Stompa manifesto up on the Discord for anybody who wants to go check it out. Why don't you take us out, Bill?
Well, thank you everybody for listening to us chat with you about 10th, which is sure to be the best edition ever. I definitely want to give a big shout out to our patrons. We got Dustin, Frederick, Chris, and Tyler now. We definitely appreciate the support. You can check us out on all the links in the description as well. We are slowly trying to make that program better, more enticing for those who are supporting the channel. So start doing some more inside scoop and maybe even doing some kind of just like patron fan chattery. Maybe get into some chats we can kind of talk to you about direction of what we're doing on the channel, what kind of stuff you want to keep hearing. Try and really hit those bases because after all, you're giving us support. So we want to keep you guys at the forefront of our mind and drop content that's relatable to you. So, and that's basically my big shout for sure. More 40k content coming down the pipe. It's gonna be good. I am looking forward to jumping in and definitely getting my reps in, because that's the best way to learn a new game for sure. Is you can list Taylor all you want, but unless you're rolling dice and actually playing the game, you're just kind of fucking daydreaming. So
the best, but not just the best. It's the only way
to learn. Yeah, gotta play, gotta lose, gotta keep painting.
Can't watch battle reports.
Yeah.
Can't just write it out. You gotta play.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for hearing us rant, everybody, tonight. We'll have more rants in the future, I promise.
Don't forget to follow Eldar Supremacy Week.
It's still going. all
Still
week.
going all week. All Eldar all week long on the Instagram. Check it out.
Awesome.
Yeah, Eldar with a capital D. Thanks for coming out tonight, guys. Y'all take care.
Catch you.
Did you plug the Patreon? We need to plug the Patreon.